Welcome, beautiful creatures, to the Lightness of Being podcast, where we celebrate the dance of life and explore ways to find joy, laughter, and lightness, even when faced with challenges. Join me, your host, Monika Stefanik, as we step into the light and discover a realm of potential and possibilities for greater ease in our lives. Let's laugh, learn, and grow together.
Well, welcome everyone to the podcast. We're here. We're doing it.
Hello.
Hello. I have sitting beside me this inspirational, beautiful, mindful, magical, mysterious
Mysterious.
woman. Lindsay James is in the house.
Thank you, darling.
I had a story I wanted to share with you that I don't think I've told you this about just a really magical moment that we got to share this summer when we were at the Medicina camp out. And I'm pretty sure, we were on the dance floor, and I think you came up behind me at one point and just came and hugged me. Do you remember this?
I definitely remember seeing you, and I definitely remember interacting with you, but I'm not sure if I remember this moment. I'm curious.
It was a beautiful, beautiful moment, and I thought about it a lot because it brought up some things for me, because I've definitely been very inspired by you and just really love how you emanate in this world. And you came up behind me and you hugged me, and I think you just, whispered like sweet lovings to me, which was so beautiful. And then you came around, I was sitting down, and you kissed my feet, and then you got up and you just like whisked away. And
I love that.
It was such a beautiful moment for me, being someone who, as a woman, like moving through a lot of sisterhood stories, and also having had a lot of interesting stories around women that I do look up to, and feeling like, not now, but in the past, kind of like, oh, I look up to you, so it's like you're above me, or you're better than me, or, all of those interesting stories that come in around like women and sisterhood, and like I'm not up to par, and I'm not worthy, and all of this. So when you came into my space and came to me and did that sweet act of just like bowing down and kissing my feet and then whisking away, it left me sitting in a space of just really sitting with a lot of that came up for me, and like coming to that space of a lot of those stories started to dismantle. Like, I've been working on it for a few years, but there was something in that of just like, wow, this woman who, I kind of idolize in a way. Just because you're amazing. You're amazing.
Oh,
You're
thank
beautiful,
you.
like the way that you be, and your story and your journey that's gotten you here. You're absolutely incredible and powerful, and it's such a gift to have you here, and to be your friend, and to be talking with you, and just getting to share space with you anytime. So,
that means a lot to me to hear that reflection. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's such a real journey for so many women, like this sisterhood space, and the accepting and loving and receiving, and for most women I've ever talked to, there is no woman without like a story of betrayal, or boundary breaches, or broken communication, or something that didn't have some sort of twist and turn that was related to a need or a want, or a sensation of jealousy or feelings, or unworthiness, and the ways that all of those emotions can morph into something very different and come out sideways. And unknowingly. And I was having an incident. I was actually talking to my partner about some stuff the other day, and I was like, this is a feeling I don't think I've entertained since like high school. It feels like a developmental feeling, where I'm like, oh, this is one of those initiatory feelings where if we don't sort it, it can kind of start to flare in different ways. And I think for a lot of us, especially in the society we're living in and have been living in, initiatory passageways in general for people have been removed. And so a lot of the friction points that would purify some of these distortions in our relations or our inability to trust or whatever don't happen in clean ways and don't always happen in like a smooth timeline, or when they would really come about and be burgeoning in us is when, adolescence, when we're like kind of trying to discover our sense of self and who we are and how we move through the world. And because we don't have these things that really ask us to examine that through ritual and rite the way that older traditions do, we have a lot of children walking around in adults' bodies and still trying to figure out why they're acting the way they're acting, or why they feel the way they feel, or what the vulnerabilities are related to. And not everyone has tools or community around them that can support that. So we have to kind of just navigate through in whatever way that we do. So I think it's a very real, like, human condition to go through these things. And there's nothing wrong that we've all had these junctures or situations. Like, they're all opportunities to learn so much. But now that we know and we feel these things, like, how do we bring it to resolution? And I think that's a big question for a lot of people. And how do we, as facilitators of conversations like these or healing spaces, help bring people to these initiatory rites where it's like, I really am ready to evolve beyond this limitation in me, or this perception that is just continues to run up in distorting ways and pull me from my center. So it's such a big conversation. I went from sisterhood to this whole big thing.
No,
but
I love it.
that's how, I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is initiations, right? And how do we come through friction to discover healthier ways to be, in dismantling that and letting just like more beautiful conversation and connection actually happen, and then choose out of the things and the parties where they're not ready to meet us in that work or that evolution. And I think there's just something too that comes with aging, because I'm in my mid-40s, and we just get better and less tolerant of more of the bullshit. We get better at like discerning, like, ooh, there's that thing again, and I have a choice point here. Whereas I think when we're younger, there's just so much still that we're gathering information and learning in that bubble of time or experience or whatever cycle we're having in relationships or sisterhood or business or whatever else. And then throw in astrology and like, is there just a timeline where we have to be in this learning and be clunky in this way before we actually transition into that next ability of understanding? And there's so many points on that.
So many
for
points,
sure.
and it's such like a roller coaster of learning and healing and everything. And I think that's like the piece of it that we can kind of get down on ourselves when we're in that process, because we do have moments where we feel really good, but then we're like, oh yeah, I feel better, I got this, or like I've transcended this piece of the puzzle or this layer of the onion, and then something else comes in, we get triggered, or something comes up in any type of situation, and it puts you back into that space of feeling like, yeah, you're that child again, and you're like, wait, but I thought I worked through this. And so I feel like it can be really easy for us to get really down on ourselves. And I spoke to a piece of how important it is to celebrate ourselves and others in one of the original first podcasts that I did, because when we get down in the dumps, you know, and we like, it's like we hyper focus in on those spaces. And it's so easy for our brain because of just programming and stuff, right? For us to do that and to fall into those spaces of victimhood and scarcity and lack and I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, and all of those like lower vibrational stories. And we just, how easy it is to just go into that. But then when we are in these moments of like, oh, I'm feeling better, or oh, I'm handling that situation totally differently than I would have in the past, it's for me, at least I'll speak, and what I've heard from other people is it actually takes some effort to lean into the celebration of that and the honoring of that and like giving that kind of its own ritual space. And as I've started to do that more with myself, when those moments of recognizing where I'm choosing better or doing better in a moment than I would have in the past and not falling into that more like childhood mind and that those programming spaces, it's like it gets easier and easier for me to be like, oh, you're doing so great. Like, that's awesome. And it could be a positive mindset. It could be taking myself out for ice cream or, you know, whatever it is, but actually giving that space like a celebration point. And it makes it easier and easier every single time. But in the beginning, it's kind of like you're fighting for it and you have to remind yourself, which is also why it gets to be so beautiful when we use the discernment of who is in our corner, who's in our circle, who like actually really is going to fan our flame and be around us in those moments and even remind us like, hey, but you are actually doing this differently than you did in the past. Like, I get to be that reflection for you. And those are the types of people that we really want to have in our circle. But it takes discernment and it takes going through situations where that's not the case.
Totally. Well, and I like to talk to my clients all the time about, I'm like, all of this is just a muscle, you know, and when we start making new choices, it's just like going to the gym and, you know, the first couple of days are like clunky and you're sore and mindset. And it takes a few weeks to finally get into like the rhythm where it's like, yeah, this feels good. And I think it's that way with these kind of choices and to choose a different behavior, to choose a different response, to show up for ourselves differently, to be bold and utilize our voice in a way that's meaningful. But it's all a muscle, right? And the more we use it, the more it's like, oh, there's inertia and now energy and now it feels really strong. And now I'm really devoted to my practice in the gym. And it's that like repetition and that alignment. And so there's, you know, the readiness, there's the aligning with the community, but there's also the action. And I think where a lot of and just speaking, I love to speak kind of like in generalizations because I'm very much a bird and kind of try to pay attention to what the collective energy is doing. But we have gotten into a place over the last probably like 5 to 10 years where I feel like we've over pathologized people. And, you know, especially with like memes and things like that, it's become really easy to throw verbiage around. And so there's a lot of things that have been brought to light in that way. And so general consciousness has access to new understanding and awarenesses that weren't in the field necessarily before this period of time. But what it's also done is like hyper focused people in a very logical way. Whereas a lot of these things are like spiritual rites of passage, right? There's our soul actually has to evolve beyond that. And that's an embodied experience. That's not a conversation. And that's why I think we're seeing the limitations in talk therapy and stuff. And I go to a therapist. I love my therapist. I've been going to her every other week for years. Like, I'm in no way down on that. I think there's an important role that traditional therapy plays, but we also have to be able to put it into action. We have to go beyond the story and beyond the mind and into the body. We have to really feel and live who we are becoming, or it doesn't stick. And if we stay in just like the spiritualizing it, whoa, kitty cat knocking altar items over, or pathologizing it and not actually move it into action. I think a lot of people can get in that rinse repeat cycle. And so there's this thing that I've been exploring for years now, like, can we actually instantaneously change, or is it just the culmination of all this work that we've been doing, and that's somewhere on this like fated timeline or
That change
predetermined?
occurs.
Or is there really that choice point that we arrive at where we're like, fuck this, I'm not doing it anymore. I am not going to tolerate this. I am not going to accept this in myself. I'm going to show up for myself this way. And it's such again, life is so nuanced and there's so many contributing factors and equal access points, right? Someone can come in through this portal and someone can come in through this one and this one and this one. So the door that opens and changes the person for whatever direction they're going is, I think, less the point, but is choice actually available to us? And can we expedite the process just by being bold and being like, no more? Like, I'm drawing this line in the sand and now I'm going to take action to meet this intention. And then I'm going to take another action and another action until that muscle is just developed in such a way where it's our nature again, or now.
Yeah. I resonate really deeply with that. There's a phrase that came from Access Consciousness, the energy work that I do, where they say, ask of the universe, but demand of yourself, right? And like that space of like, yes, like everything is like, we do have this ability to like ask and quote unquote manifest, but it is like, it's not going to always like show up exactly when or how we want things to. So it's like, you have to show up and take that action. And this is the conversation I've been having with a lot of people as well, is like, it's amazing to dream, and we are like souls inhabiting a body, but the reason that we have a body is to be able to take action, to bring those things, those lessons, those dreams, those visions into physical form. Like that's why we get to be here. We chose it, and it's amazing. And there's also like, all the ups and downs and all the nuances through it all, but it's like finding and aligning with what feels most deeply resonant to you and continuing to choose your way on that path and take action on that path instead of falling victim to life is happening to me, right? Like life is happening for me. And even with that, like, how can I show up in this moment regardless of what challenge or what blessings I'm going through, and continue to choose my way forward? So like, I do really feel that like, choice and free will like exists. And I also have this, understanding that there is like a timeline, right, that we're following. And I mean, there's so much with that. Like there's so much nuance with that. Like my brain is like,
I know, I'm constantly reconciling.
You think about like the Akashic records and just like everything that we've done and like how that leads to like where we're going. And it's
dharmic cycles, karmic cycles, like which perspective. And
but it's like, even if things are predetermined, we still have choice in these individual moments. And I think that's what I'm getting to, right? It's that space of like, you still get to choose how you're going to respond or react to that person or that situation, or the choice that you're going to make. Are you going to move? Are you going to stay? Like whatever that looks like is for you. And does what you're choosing feel like it's in alignment with where you want to go and what your life, the energy of your life feels like it wants to be?
Well, and this is where responsibility comes in, right?
Hugely.
If we are approaching life from a lens of I am responsible, and it doesn't mean I get to determine all the things that occur or the outcomes or the timelines, but it does mean I'm showing up with my best foot forward, being responsible for what I'm putting out into the world, energetically, verbally, physically, how I'm meeting the people I'm choosing to surround myself by, how I'm showing up for whatever endeavors it is that I'm choosing in, whether it's career or familial or community or whatever it is. But if it's like, I'm going to give my greatest presence and my greatest understanding of how to be a good human and contributor, then I think that there's a lot of obstacles that really clear. And I think going back to what you said about I try not to use the word victim, but I know we all understand what that means when we're saying like victim mentality. But I think that when people are are not yet in the helm of their ship. When they're sitting back and when they're still just letting the waves hit them as opposed to like trying to surf the waves. They're in that passivity. Well, let's call it passivity.
I like that.
Because there's any number of reasons people are in passivity, right? It's a learned behavior. They've truly been victimized by life and they are out of energy. They're depleted. They don't have the tools and skills. They don't have the community. They don't have the resources. I mean, there are so many reasons people are in passivity. And then talk about how society, if they have access to internet and things like that, we're just flooded and inundated with information and energy, and just so much is stimulating us. And so I fundamentally get passivity. I understand why a lot of people are in passivity, and I don't walk around in disdain for the fact that there are so many people who are still just like, you know. There's a lot coming at us, and it takes not only a lot of courage and a lot of energy and a lot of desire, but a true anchoring and rootedness in self to step forward. And that doesn't mean that exists all the time. Like there's an unsure step that most of us take when we leap into whatever the next iteration of our beingness is. But someone has to get to that full-on responsibility. Like there's a very distinct action that has to take place in someone. They have to be like, no more, you know, I'm over it. Like I'm showing up for the game of life in a very different way. And that's where that's the difference between what was and what is, I think, is that choice point. And so coming back to it, I think that there is a very real choice point that has to occur. And if people are continuing to like wait for something or a sign to show up even, you know, instead of just like, yeah, if we don't start creating our own destiny while also living side by side with whatever cosmic destiny or whatever your belief about the matrix of life and what happens before and after this incarnation as we know it, your life's going to pass you by and you're going to get pummeled by the chance and the chaos, as opposed to showing up with choice, chance, and chaos. And if you're actively working with choice, chance, and chaos, you become more ninja and nimble, right? And you're like, okay, so this is coming. And you become just this, very fluid soul when you choose that and accept all of this other stuff that's still happening. But yeah, passivity to action is really the only way I think we actually change anything.
Yeah, that radical responsibility has been so alive in my world really recently. And I love just how you described all of that, because I don't feel like necessarily I've been super passive, but there have been a lot of ways where I've been opened up to recently where I've been seeing that the ways that I have been. And like that shift where you're like, there's a choice that has to be made at some point where you're just like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like I am in the driver's seat of my life. And yes, things have happened to me. And like, yes, there's been hardship. And also like, how am I choosing to show up to that? And like, I love the life that I've created for myself and that I get to live. And I'm so grateful and filled with so much joy to be able to like be here and experiencing this life. So like, why am I being passive about it? Why am I not making those choices and taking responsibility and moving forward for like what I want to create? And like, yeah, it's going to cause some ripples. And yeah, some people might not be the happiest at all of my choices, but it's also like, it's not, there's like this space of making choices when other people are involved, of like doing it from a space of love and kindness and understanding, not just like your ego, like, I'm just going to do this for me. And like, you know, bye bitch, basically. But this space of, like also understanding that we are still part of a collective, even in the choices that we do make. Absolutely. And that like, when you're saying kind of just like being like a ninja and being in the flow, that's how I felt these last few weeks, because there's been so much that's come up into my world. And yet the way that I've been showing up for myself, like within my self-care, self-love practices, and like being able to take care of myself in my life, but then continuing to make these choices, and instead of leaning into the space of overwhelm and then allowing that to make me really passive, which I would have automatically done, it's like I recognize that that's a space that I would have gone to, and I'm just like, I can't even do that. Like I need to, not even like I need to, like I choose to just be moving forward and making a choice. Like I could spend days ruminating on this, or I could just be like, okay, spirit, please help me, please guide me. And also like, what's the choice that feels most light and aligned right now? And just finding my way through that. And then something else comes in and you're like, okay, we're going to breathe. We're going to like take a hot second and be with it. It doesn't mean like making a reactionary choice. It does also bring in the topic of like taking some time and actually slowing down and pausing. Like even when when there's chaos and there's all this other stuff going on, it's like, it's okay to take a moment and take 3 deep breaths. If that's like all that you do before you make a choice to move forward, that's so much better than just automatically reacting to something. And like a lot of times we think, especially in our culture that's so fast paced, it's like, especially if they're, I don't know, there's big decisions that need to be made. It's like, oh, I got to do it right now. And it's like, yeah. And also like you have time and space to take 3 deep breaths, or to take half of your day, or to go for a walk, or whatever that looks like. Like it can look like a lot of spaciousness, but it can also just look like tuning into your breath for a few moments and grounding down into your center, into your body, and then making a choice that feels most resonant in that moment from that space. But if we're moving from this crazy headspace and that
Absolutely. Well, I think what you're
compulsion.
talking about too is presence, right? Yeah, more if we are present, like truly present as frequently as possible, moment by moment, then we aren't holding anything other than what's alive for us. So things like overwhelm become less possible because you recognize like the only reality, true reality, is this one right in front of me. And how will I show up to this moment, and how will I respond to this moment, not react to it? Because I think reaction is that that unconscious, just like, reactivity is an instinctual, more like primal instinctual response, as opposed to an intuitive, like embodied understanding of what you're looking at, what you're confronting, and then acting from that place of awareness. And so, presence is absolutely a part of the equation. Like, how do we seek to support that in us? And it can be just slowing down and reminding to interrupt, but any pattern just needs disruption. So I talk to my clients a lot about like, the goal is to become a disruptor.
Yeah.
Like you need to see yourself as a mighty disruptor. And there's 1,000,001 tools I might give them to disrupt, but you have to start like reconfiguring how you utilize energy, imagination, and awareness to become the change that you're really wanting to harness and activate. And again, I also want to talk to, because you mentioned the community, and it's really the other thing that has happened in the last like 10 years or so is that like hyper focus on the individual in a lot of ways. And I mean, our society in large has become a very individualistic society, just the way we've set up our systems. And, the community care model is just like becoming a popular conversation again. And just a lot of people live single family homes, and there's less unity in all these things. And so how are we dealing with that? A lot of people have fallen on the sword of, this is all my responsibility now. I have to fix everything. I have to fix me. And so they become so self-focused in that process of discovery that they are no longer present to what's actually happening, even though they're well-intended in their pursuit of just discovering who they are, what they need to heal or whatever. It's like, stop. Like, if we can just come back to a place where we trust that if we can slow ourselves enough to pay attention, what needs to be worked with and dealt with or created or asked of us, it will reveal itself moment to moment. And if we can simplify our approach, and we can instead of just constantly like trying to improve or shift or focus on ourselves, come back to the we, and like, how can I contribute today? For a long time, for many years, when I was first starting my business and shifting out of social work, I would wake up and I would literally say, Spirit, how will you use me today in service? Like, where can I go? What can I do? How can I show up? And it wasn't that I needed like a business download or, something like that. I was genuinely like, use me, like keep me focused outward, like let me continue to see beyond myself. Like if I can just be present with another mom who is stressed that day and just listen, and that's my service, great. If I can, make eye contact with a fellow human who is suffering and without house and just let them know that they are seen and acknowledged and not invisible. It was as simple as that, but as significant as that. These little ways, if we can just be present, like who is in the environment? Where are we spatially? Like what is happening here? And I can't tell you how many times over the years people have commented on my ability to be present with them.
Yeah.
And like people at the checkout, I always try to make sure I make eye contact, and it doesn't mean I always have a conversation because you can always read the energy and pay attention. But I try to be as present with every moment, situation, and person as possible. And then it's like, how can we share in this energy exchange in such a way that it's meaningful for everybody? And so I think a big part of these shifts a lot of people want to make are just turning their lens back out towards the whole. And a lot of the time, if we can also see that there's so many other things going on, I've got my animals and I'm a mother and partner and, I have all these things that I can give my love and energy to. And in that space, it becomes my meditation because I'm not sitting here like focused on myself or, mulling over things or ruminating on thoughts. And so finding ways where we are like giving our energy back, whether it's a garden, whether it's, our animals, whether it's going to tend a neighbor, whether it's making food with love, but just like pouring energy outward and trying to disrupt that just hyper focus that we get so entrenched in. And I know that place. I mean, I definitely have had different, hills along my journey where I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why am I still doing this? Are we really up against this same lesson again? What am I not getting? And then we get into the head of it. But the longer I've been on this planet and the more I have worked with people, I'm like, if we all trusted implicitly, not only in ourselves, but in the fact that what needs to be sorted or responded to or enjoyed or experienced is always right in front of us. And yes, we have choice. Like if we're in a environment or a relationship that is really soul-sucking and not great for us or abusive, whatever it might be, if we remove ourselves, we're going to have a very different experience to make choices with. So yes, there are these awarenesses and these actions that we've been talking about that you have to make to put yourself in front of a new space. But if we can keep refining our environment and our people, and we continue to cultivate safer and safer and safer and safer and safer spaces, eventually it whittles down to, can we figure out how to be present and just hold what's here and just respond and make decision about what's here. And over the years, it's been so beautiful to get to a place where I'm like, do I want cheese on my potatoes? And it's just like, these are my choices, where for years before I could carry the weight of the world with me and the burdens of my loved ones and my children.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do about the political state of the world? And, and I was holding and mulling and ruminating on so much. And when I really learned, like, what can I control? What can I not control? Okay, that's an easy. And then went into the refining of environment, community situations with all.
Right now.
And then you just keep parsing that out through good choices. And all of a sudden one day you find yourself in sanctuary in every direction, in every way, not flooded, not overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean we're immune from grief or process or any of that. So that's not what I'm saying, but we have the capacity and the ability to metabolize and work with what arrives for us in a very different way than when we're in that perpetual saturation mode, or we're in that passive and everything's just coming in on us all the time and we don't even know where to begin sorting or sifting or digesting. So yeah, finding our way through all of that. But I think discernment and choice are just such a huge part of this refinement process, that people have to be willing to make different choice and be discerning, and no longer make excuses for others, no longer make excuses for themselves, no longer loyalties are a big thing that bind us, and sisterhood, back to our original conversation, and familial relations. So many people end up carrying really gnarly relationships in their bloodlines just because there's this bloodline loyalty. But it's like, yes, you share blood with this human, but if this human is really impeding on your ability to preserve your own life force and energy, or your wellness, or your ability to serve in the world in places that are reciprocal and could actually receive you and offer back, get the fuck out of there, So it's how people orient and what they are prioritizing in terms of what's allowed to be around, and how they give it and how they show up, and what they're giving permission to for themselves and others. And yeah, all of this is big, and it's all so possible though. And I think that's the thing that I love about the mind, just like I've lived every bit of this understanding. Like, I've walked through hell realms and violence and abuses that were gnarly and just yuck. And all in the name, at one point in time, of peacekeeping, or being a servant and patience, and all of these stories that we tell. So I know passivity, I know conflict avoidance, I know peacekeeping, I know flooding, I know overwhelm, I know depression, having experienced all these things, and then really being able to look back from this vantage point now, which is full of just sanctuary and peace and choice, and flow and clarity and deep listening. It's like, it's possible. And I think that that's the thing for a lot of us to remember in a world that feels so chaotic right now and is so like out of our control. Like, how do we affect change? It's like, here. Yeah. You start here, and then
It starts to ripple out.
you
Be the change you want to see in the world,
Totally.
right? It's like that simple, but that's not simple at all.
while still, paying attention to others, keep the we with you. But yeah, what do you need, and how can you quiet your world? And we were speaking a little bit about like frequency medicine and stuff, but we are frequency medicine. If our heart is emanating and vibrating and such warmth, I like to joke with my clients, I'm like, be a walking smudge stick, raise it to where you're just, that emanation, that field of your heart is so significant that just walking through places like clears,
You change the vibration of the
energy.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing.
It is.
And, all the things that they've studied over the years, and Greg Braden, I haven't studied his stuff in many years, but the Heart Math Institute,
I was about to
way
say the
back
heart
in the
math.
day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Those are real things that they could catalog. Like, if there was enough amplification of like that energy field, like it really lifts and shifts everything around it, including what has to be digested by Mother Earth, right?
Yeah.
And yes,
transmuted and
there's
transformed by her.
all the things going on, and wild unknown things in our sky, and manipulation of all variety that is man. But I think a lot of the natural disasters are also Mother Earth, like constantly having to recalibrate to just the impact of our actions, but also the density on the planet. Like she's moaning and moving and she's having to burn and digest because there's so much. It's just like rampant. So it's not just like a biological, geological thing. It's also a very real energy frequency thing. And so there's so many different ways we can contribute, but it does come through this vessel that is us. And humans are so like we are a supercomputer. Like we are amazing technology. I think we're some of the most remarkable technology on the planet. And yes, there are, again, all of these are so nuanced. You know, there's chemicals in the field and our water's not always clean and things coming down from the, you know, there's all these pollutants and microplastic, you know, all the things that people can point to that are reasons why we don't have the operating system that is optimal and why health is what it is. And I still think that we are powerful enough beings and creators. And in no way am I saying people don't get sick or people don't have cancer or any of that stuff. But
we can also reclaim that. There's
there's
inner
like
sourcing of like that happens, and also like not even from a space of control, but like, what can I do about this? Like, I am this amazing piece of technology. I get so passionate about health, right? That's like why I do what I do, because I'm just like, it's like there is another way. Like, yes, those things exist. Like, yes, that's alive in your world. And also like there are other ways when we do start to come from this space of like, I'm amazing. This body that I have is incredible. And coming from that space of like deep inner resourcing and starting to come to presence and to slow down and to start to override all of that programming and come back here, which I know from like my personal experience is also very, very challenging. Like when I started to experience peace in my life, which is something that I'd asked for so long, like where I'm at right now is something I've wanted for so long. But when it started to come in, I started to get a little like, the chaos was, it is destabilizing. The chaos was so comfortable. And so I was like, wait, but there's peace here, but now I don't know what to do with it. And this is really weird, but I know that I wanted this. So there was a weird, and then I would like go back in and notice that I was kind of unconsciously, consciously making choices to bring chaos back into my life. And it was just, it's this cycle that repeats until again, you're like, take responsibility and you're like, no more. I know what that tastes like. And in order to get to where I want to go, using discernment and practicing deep presence. And one of my favorite things to do is, be just in that space of how does my ask for myself, my life, my business create greater for the whole as well. And like you said, constantly keeping, constantly keeping the collective in the vision of what we're doing, which is like, comes to a space of like, it's okay to ask for more money. Right? Like it's okay to ask for these like worldly things so that you can be the best version of yourself that you want, but not from that space of like, I just want more money just for me so I can have the dream house, the car or whatever. But it's like, how can this ask for more clients in my business or for more money actually create greater for the whole and for the collective? And what does that look like? And what does that intention come through me? Like, what do I want to create? What does that look like? And that just, it opens up your heart. And you start talking about, like the heart resonance, like that opens up your heart in a totally different way, in the way that you start to become really present with yourself. There's so much that you spoke to that I'm like, oh my gosh. It's so great getting to just listen to you. What you said about I loved what you said about how the earth she's moving and she's shifting and she's just like, she's trying to transform like this deep, the density that's here. I'm like, I'm thinking about dance and all these ways that like I've shifted and moved like emotions and heaviness that's moved through my body. It's like has to come out as a rage sometimes, and then other times it comes out as like a sweet softness or just like a holding and a nurturing, and it just that visual of like what the earth is going through and what she just how she shifts and moves. I was like, oh my gosh, like that. I love that so much. It's such a beautiful way to see her and connect with her in a totally different way. And gives a much more visceral experience, because it's like that's how we move through this world when you're tapped and tuned in that way, right? When you're coming back to that space of like presence and, okay, like how do I need to be with myself in order to approach life and approach these situations and choose from a space of radical responsibility in what I am here to create.
Totally. Well, and we're I mean, we are elemental beings, just like Mother, right? With that fire and water, you know, that earth, my body, water, my blood, blah, blah, blah. But reminding us like how wild and primal we are too. You know, we are an earth unto itself in that way. You know, we have a whole ecosystem in here. And I think a lot about not I think a lot, but when I think about like the medical system, for example, and about how doctors are so highly trained, but through a pinhole, right? Like they have to choose a specialization, and then they learn all this and become experts in this little bitty like lens. And I think about that as a metaphor for the human system in general. Like, we are complex organisms, and it requires mind, body, spirit coherence, and learning how to utilize our systems. But so many people are, you know, looking through, I don't even want to, it seems that a lot of people get really narrow in their focus of this system, as opposed to approaching it as a mystery and a complex organism. And so they don't come and approach it as often as possible in a place of curiosity and like, I want to learn from you, right? And so I remember when I changed my lens from dissociation, my early 20s, I spent a lot of time in dissociation from my physical body, my pleasure body, my intuitive body, and lived very heavily in my mental body. And I, like many other humans on this planet, had some abuses and some violence when I was a kid, and then just the other normal, but more traditional things that we run into, challenging relationship, divorce, you know, things like that. But my response system, because we're not super trained, I mean, we don't have an education system that puts people into their body and gets them well versed. I mean, these are things people have to discover on a seeker's path. Very seldom do people feel they're fluent in their knowledge of body wisdom or even how this system works. I find myself constantly teaching my clients, you know, like the mind is a computer. It's an operating system that you program, or that life will, if we're in that place of passivity. But it's it should be like the third thing on the totem pole. It's like, you're in your body is sensing, your body's the subconscious mind. It can take in all of this information, then it's digesting it. Your intuition is sensing and feeling and communicating. Your heart is also talking. And then these things say, okay, now mind, put this into action, whether it's a vision or whether it's cook that food or make that different choice. But the mind, fundamentally, if we are running this system in a more coherent way in integrity with its design, the mind is quiet until it's put into action. It's like, not to bring AI into it, but it's like ChatGPT waiting for us to ask it a question. And it's like,
It just
they're here. But I'm in this non-animated space until then. And, you know, of course, it's not just holding consciousness, and is consciousness even in our mind? Or is it this thing that comes in and through us, and the brain is really still just this system that keeps us breathing and moving and
there, and
allowing us to put idea into action after it comes through this other space. So, you know, that's a whole nother episode. But, you know, I think when people can start to give themselves permission to recognize, I am a complex organism. I am so much more than my thoughts. And I am governed and ruled by this kind of elemental nature. Like I'm meant to be fluid. I'm meant to be feeling. I'm meant to be the passion of fire. And the more we can understand energy, body, and there's, different schools of thought around how we relate to them. But just when we can understand we're energy beings fundamentally, and when we are not moving the life force, the chi and the prana, and allowing things to just be in a state of constant evolution, that's when we stagnate. That's when we get stuck. That's when the mind starts ruminating, things like that. So back to that kind of like pinhole, if people can like zoom back out and be like, I actually don't know anything. And the less I know, the more that gives me room to be curious and be a learner and really begin to invite that relationship instead of one of dissociation where we're just letting, the external world inform us or our old patterns inform us. When we go into that curiosity and start asking, and when the body is also part of that inquiry, like, body, like, what do you have to teach me? Like, what am I feeling? What do I need? Like, what is alive in me? And we begin to utilize it as the instrument and intelligence it is and let it inform us. It's a radically different ballgame. And I remember that path of like dissociation to integration and embodied, inhabiting myself. It was like
And trusting. There's a trust.
night and day. Yeah. And I think we have a lot of passive people who are dissociated from bodies, so they can't hear this. And it's already bodies so, stagnated and overwhelmed and flooded by all the stimuli that we've addressed, that it makes a lot of sense that it's so difficult for a lot of people. But it's not unattainable in any way. They just have to come back in and change the lens and begin to get curious. And you mentioned so many different practices, and I think that's just one of the main things that, anyone should remember is like, there's not a pathway to get to inhabiting self. You just have to find things that start to unlock and open and give you that. You just have to make the choice. And like you said, calling to spirit or whatever it is that you connect to in terms of the energy beyond the self, right? Like we can look at the trees and the snows and the mountain and the animals, and there's a beautiful energy that runs through this. It is much greater than man. And so whatever you relate to that source energy, but really recognizing like there is a web of life here. We are very much part of it, and we should be so grateful for that. And we should also call to that and let that inform us, because if this is an ecosystem and there's this whole ecosystem, like the whole mandala thing, like surely we're part of a cell of a larger ecosystem. And so if we can understand how to vibrate higher and just be more clear, surely there's a contribution again. So we're back at that.
Yeah.
You contribute by becoming and by inhabiting and by trusting yourself implicitly. And then all the things back to that very, center point of the conversation beginning, like those little parts of us that want to not trust or want to lash out or want to hide or want to stay in the patterns of abuse or whatever they might be. Those parts just dissolve when you are so soft and in your wholeness that everything's safe there, so they don't need to act out. They have rest instead. Like that's when we come all the way in and we can feel everything and we can hold everything and create that space and that capacity, then a lot just sort of sifts and dissolves. And that's where, this conversation, if we're present, if we're soft, if we're feeling, if we're tuned in, then when something speaks up, we can immediately step in and say, hi, you are welcome here. What is this? And we can respond from there and make choices based on the insight that we're receiving, as opposed to have all these unconscious things just like whipping us around and pulling us. And so integration and deep embodiment are really just such a critical part of the journey of someone who wants peace and stability.
Yeah. And what that journey looks like for you as an individual is yours. Like I feel like it also gets challenging because, especially with social media and stuff nowadays, like you see everyone doing all these different things and it's like, oh, like I'll do that or I'll do that or I'll do that. And oh, I'm not changing or I'm not getting this peace or my life isn't shifting in the way that I want. And it's like, I feel like it comes back to that space of like, we're still, when we're doing things like that, we're still outsourcing, right? And so again, coming back to that of like, which is that challenging space of like coming back into you, you and I were talking right before we started recording of even just, we've never dieted or anything like that. Like, and just naturally like, hey, I just started taking my vitamins again and I just started doing this thing and I got this frequency device and I just felt called to it, right? And so it's by following those little nudges that feel right for you in your life and like noticing that awareness when it comes in and following that and taking action on it instead of like, oh, well, but this person might think something weird if I do that. Or like, oh, well, but maybe I should like consult my doctor or like maybe I should go do that or, whatever. And it comes to that space of just really, really radically trusting yourself and your intuition and listening to it. And the more that we do that, the stronger that gets and the more that we begin to trust ourselves. But it's like, again, we are inundated with so much information that like, it should look this way or you should be doing this and that. And it's like, there are a lot of things out there. And it's awesome when you see something and you can see something and be like, whoa, something about that feels like a full fuck yes, right? Like, okay, I'm going to lean into that. But if it's like, we're constantly bombarded by information, it's like, I'm going to try that thing. And like this month I'm going to do this diet and this month I'm going to do this diet. It's like, no wonder things aren't changing or no wonder you're losing weight and then gaining it back again or whatever the goal is, quote unquote, like, because we're not actually truly listening to that deep intuitive space, which does take practice to get to and to start to, again, like you said, like just like shift away the junk, whether it's people or environments in your life and to come back to that space. Like I feel like we are starting to shift radically, at least the people in my world, into this space of kind of like hermiting a little bit to get back to that space. It's kind of like we just gotta like keep everything on the outside for right now in order to come back to that inner resourcing and actually getting to hear our own inner space and our own intuition. And then from there and building those practices, then starting to like bring the world in a little bit, like I'll speak to for myself, which it feels kind of vulnerable, but like, of course, with like our political climate here in the United States, it's a lot. And I'm going to be super honest, like I don't fully know everything that's going on. And that's coming from a space of choice, not from a space of ignorance, because there's also so much going on in my own internal environment that I'm like, that space of I don't have the capacity to take this information in right now. And I was contemplating that this morning because I was like, well, a voice came in, right? Well, like you should know, right? Because it's affecting the collective. It's affecting your friends and, a lot of people, and you should know what's going on. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go, start to take in some of this information. And then I had this hit. I was like, that time will come for you, Monika, but right now is not the moment. And it's great that you're thinking about that, but right now is not the moment. Like when you have the capacity to be able to take it in, you will be able to take it in and be able to take that information and knowledge from a much more like integrated, grounded space and not let it overwhelm you or bring you into a state of fear and all this, but actually be able to take it and be like, okay, what can I do with this? And how can I show up in service to the collective? But there has been that voice of like, oh, I'm ignorant, right? Or like, oh, I'm doing something wrong by not constantly taking in this influx of information that's happening in our world, because that makes me a bad person, because or like seem like I don't care. about the collective when actually it's like the total opposite. I'm like,
Yeah.
in order to use my discernment in this way, this is what that looks like right now. And it's not forever. It's not like I'm just going to remain blissful of like, everything's fine. And it's like, no, of course everything's not fine.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, this is what feels like the most aligned choice for me, so that when I do choose to take in this information, I can actually show up from a space of service.
Absolutely. I have this conversation all the time with my clients right now.
Yeah.
This is a regular conversation. I have this conversation with my partner, and I've had this conversation with myself. And this kind of goes. We sort of touched on the whole: what can you control and what can you not, and what are you bringing into your system, and everything else. And so during times, we'll call it just the great churning. When it feels like the spotlight is on, this is relevant to every human everywhere. And the way it's coming at us and the rapid clip at which it's moving, it almost is like this is part of the plan, right? That people feel infiltrated and flooded, and they're wanting people's attention on this right now.
To
And
distract
so,
from something, maybe.
well, yeah, I mean, I who can actually ever know, people at best can guess at what is unfolding and what's really happening and impact of it. There's a lot of unknowns right now, and being in the unknown, being in the mystery is an uncomfortable place. But there's also this like urgency that's coming with that, that is putting more pressure on people who are in that place of passivity or neutrality. And it doesn't mean that a move from neutrality is that consumption of news is required, for example. But maybe that means that a move from neutrality is a recognition. I need to be in hermitage right now. I need to be in deep listening right now. I need to be in calibration right now. And my service right now is showing up for this that I need to do, this getting right with me, so that I will have capacity to show up for the service when it's asked of me. And that's wisdom. So when people can recognize, coming back to that very simple thing, like when you can recognize what is being asked of you, what is calling to you, sit back, come forward, speak out, create this. Like those are all callings, if we let them come to us that way and then take action from that place. And the way we can show up to this particular point in history right now is going to look different. Like the service that we all bring is going to be radically different. Some people are going to bring their art. Some people are going to bring their news. Some people are going to bring their, boots and march. Some people are going to write letters. Some people are going to make calls. Some people are going to hold grief rituals. Some people are going to just keep doing what they do. Some people are going to ground their families. Like there are so many different ways we can show up to it. And it doesn't mean that we all have to stay so abreast of the consumption and the narrative that is cloaking this time. But I think more than ever, we are in a time on the planet, and I think this was even prior to what's happened in the last month. We are and have been in a place of great burgeoning. I mean, we're at the end of the Kali Yuga and this 400,000 year cycle where we've supposedly been in the dark ages, and there's this mass awakening. And for whatever that means to people, again, there's a lot of different perspectives on what that means and what does it mean to awaken, and is this something that's going to happen in our lifetime? Are we talking about it's the end, so there's another 500 years of this? Like we don't know. So we are in this place of great churning where it is clear that new information and old information are reconciling and coming into this like clash. It's clear that people are being activated and pushed from their point of neutrality and really feeling compelled to move in some way, whether that's move inward and embody themselves finally so they can trust their intuition, whether that means changes in relationships, jobs, career, whatever. People are being aroused from this place of neutrality, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
Now, how
Wired.
you show up for that, this is where the responsibility comes in. So change is happening, and it's happening at a rapid clip all around us. And if we want to tuck in, we can, but at some point, the tidal wave will come for us. So the better tuned and prepared we have created this instrument that is us, and the more we have touched in and oriented ourselves and really built a true community that we can love and trust around us to get through these times and have diversity within that community. So there's the carpenter, and there's the gardener, and there's the healer, and there's the caretaker, and, all these different things that we're going to need. And whatever version of rebuild is coming, but it's very clear rebuild is coming.
Yes.
And that begins here. We all have to truly align ourselves and do whatever sifting and shifting is required so that we are strong and we are clear and we know as we move forward during this great change, like, what is the call? When do I go? When do I sit back? And can I rest in the space between? Because rest is always required, period, but especially during times of great impact like we're in right now. And that can't be overlooked either in this process of coming home to ourselves.
Wow. Thank you for all of that. Amazing. Yeah, I love that you spoke to the space of rest, because that's something that I feel like, especially in American culture, is very challenging.
Totally.
But it's it's so vitally important to move from that space, and what that rest gets to look like is so different for everyone. But this go culture that we live in is just not the way, and a lot of us are feeling this great change, this great shift that's happening and occurring. I think Richard Rudd calls it the great change in the gene keys, and it feels so rapid and alive right now, and so many people are talking about being in this time of shedding our snake skin and just like releasing so much, but also like this rapid manifestation that's happening if we are truly showing up from that space of responsibility and from that space of like intuitive guidance. And just like moving from that solid foundation within ourselves, because it's really obvious the people that I see that are cultivating that and the ones that are not. And talk about like using, discernment when it comes to our community. That's been kind of a challenging space for me to see the people that are moving from that space. It's so beautiful and actually really inspiring, and the ones that I feel really led to connect with and talk with and create with, it's been absolutely incredible. And then I also see, these people who are not necessarily in that space, which is okay. Like, there's no judgment there, but it's hard when I see that coming through people that I really love and care for, and I'm just like, I want to like help them through it, but there's also that space of like, it's not my job.
Totally.
Too, and I can be there to a point, and also like, where's that discernment of like, how am I draining myself in this direction by giving care or attention to this person that is obviously not ready to choose to take responsibility in that direction. And that's just been a really challenging space, and I've heard a few other people sharing that too, of like, we're shedding a lot of things, and like shedding the people in our lives, especially ones that have been there for a long time, is challenging, and it's not because they've done anything wrong or have been hurtful or anything. It's just we're kind of going in this like moving in different directions. And I've been reading. Yesterday I was diving into a bunch of different gene, and there's so much to contemplate with all of that. And absolutely adore how Richard Rudd has been able to verbalize or transcribe the information that comes through to him. And he was speaking to one of the aspects where it's just like, which brought me a lot of solace, because I'm like, I just want everyone to come along for the ride. I'm like, oh, let's go, especially the people that I love and that are close to me. I'm like, let's go, we got it, let's do it. And he was just speaking to the space of like how it's like, it will happen for everyone at some point, but like for those people right now, like if they're not choosing it, that's okay. And it's like they'll get there eventually. It's just going to take a little bit longer, and that's okay. And to allow that process to be their own, and then to allow you to be in your process and to keep moving forward from that space. But I feel like there's something within me that sometimes feels like we're leaving people behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as a recovered caretaker, I get that too. I think I think those of us who are born with servant's heart, and then also if we are raised in environments that brought out the caretaker in us as a as a pattern, it's particularly hard to not want to save everyone and love everyone and make sure everyone has as much as you can offer all the time. And there's so much packed into that. But at the end of the day, the most simple way I've come to terms with that desire is, if the goal is that I trust myself implicitly, the goal is also that I trust you implicitly. And that means hands off. And that has helped me a lot. As a mother who ended up divorced, and my young adult boys live out of state. And so after many years of difficult litigation and just lots of stuff, I decided to trust my bond with my kids and let them go for really the sake of everyone's peace. But it was that I trust that this is, and space and time will not dictate or inform the truth of that. And I'm going to choose trust instead of lack or scarcity or whatever other story I could have spun about the difficulty associated with letting my children move to be with their dad at another state. And from there, it really became easier when I had to do that with my bond of my babies, my boys, I now have to trust their path. And I'm not going to be there day in and day out to, guide them, scold them, help them. And I'm going to have to trust them and the bond that I can offer them from here. And after I integrated through that, and it's been several years now since I made that transition, but that opened up so much in my field, just in general about relationships, because I was like, I have to let every soul be who they're going to be without imposing my perspective on them, that I think I know better, that I know the way, that, like any of that, that's all bullshit. And then just really recognizing all the ways that by doing that, I'm also distorting my own way of creating. I'm distorting my own energy reserves, and can lead to great depletion, and then no one's being productive, and we've just there's just like becomes a mess when we do that. And so the more I've continued to just like unplug from places that I had put my intention or energy toward, that where it didn't belong, and just brought it back, not only did I like re-energize myself, because I'm like, whoa, that was a lot of like siphoning of my energy just by worrying about that person or trying to help them through something prematurely, or that they didn't ask for help. And the old adage, of course, like unsolicited advice, unsolicited help, not welcome. Like in general, it is not welcome. And people are only ready when they're ready. And there's no true truth in that either, that I've discovered along the way. And so if we come in on anyone, most of the time, what we end up doing is not actually helping, but we create a situation where people are really sitting back or they're contracting or, their walls come up and then they can't hear us, they can't receive us. So whatever good intention we brought in and whatever might have been really helpful, and it might have been really helpful, but if it's not asked for or invited, it's not well received usually. And so just remembering all of those things has made it easier over the years for when my worry comes up for someone, or when I think like, oh, if they would just quit drinking, or if they would quit, whatever it is, and I can help them, or I have a lamplight. And when that impulse would come up, I just breathe into it like all of the other interesting things. And like, have they asked or given any indication? And we can knock and we can say, hey, if you ever want to share what's going on, I'm here. If you ever want any ideas, I'm happy to riff with you. There are ways we
You
can
can open the door.
open the door and let people know, like, we care about you. We are here for you. I am happy to create space for this conversation. But just bringing it in on people is not the way. And I think a lot about internal leadership too. And if we create, because over the years and over the last several years, I love and adore all of my clients. But in my early years, when I was transitioning from social work and I was working with the unhoused and people dealing with substance abuse, so I was, in the densities of life. And when I was transitioning into my private practice, I noticed this trend of a lot of clients who are coming to me and like, here, fix me and let me just plug in to you, essentially. And they wanted to give me all their power. And I was like, no, like, I can't help you if this is the dynamic you're wanting to take. And over the years, like, anytime that energy shows up where they're like, you're the way, or like, better than me, I'm like, I'm not your teacher then, because I'm here to help you bring that internal leadership forward. Because if you don't have that, like, you're gonna collapse anytime you're not upheld by someone else outside of you, or you're gonna collapse in your relationships or as a parent or wherever it might be. And we need people who are not gonna collapse right now, because a lot of things are going to be collapsing right now. Systems are going to be collapsing. Communities are going to be collapsing. Mindsets are going to be collapsing.
You need to be very...
So people need to know how to hold themselves and how to walk upright, tall back, and strong spine, shoulders open, heart open. Like, we need people who can lead and emanate from within with whatever, like, relationship. And I've been hearing myself talk to my clients a lot too about relationship with whatever this is. I'm like, if it's God for you, beautiful. If it's God, it's for you. If it's source, if it's a number of deities, if it's Mother Nature, however, that's okay. But find a greater connection, because you can't self-source yourself entirely. We rely on the elements. We rely on the sun. We rely on the food that grows from mama's breast and the water. I mean, we need other things, and we need community. We are communal beings. We can't do this alone. And
to help
you have to be
to this
strong in yourself, so you know what your role in the community is. And if you are listening and your intuition and you can move through there, from there, then you will know your role. Like you said, you will know when it's time to serve. You will know when it's time to show up. And I think, in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, I think we might be in a possibility of an all hands on deck kind of situation where people are going to be building in every way that we know how to build. And so we're going to need to understand what our genius and our offering is. And when I say genius, that's not to intimidate anyone. It's just like, what is your soul's imprint, and what comes easy and naturally. And that's the other thing I like to tell people too. I'm like, when finding your path or orienting yourself, like, it's like, when we hit the innate, it's something that compels you and it pulls you and it whispers to you and it tantalizes you and It gives you energy and inertia. So anything that's not that, if you're running into resistance after resistance, likely it's because you're on the completely wrong lens or pathway, and you are chasing something that isn't yours to chase. Because anything that needs to be known, and this is a personal discovery as well as one I've heard reflected from many people along the way, but when it's time to learn something for me, like it comes in and it locks. And my fish tanks, like I now know so much about fish and fish tanks and ecosystems, and I'd never had an aquarium before 4 months ago. And
now you have like multiple.
it was, and it was, but the learning was insatiable. I mean, truly was a calling to create these, and I still can't even explain why. I can share all the impacts it's had, but that's irrelevant to this conversation. But it was learn this, and when I would learn, it would just imprint. And I can look back on my journey and all the things that felt like callings or like pulled me. It would be that same thing. It was like imprint. And then there were those things that I contrived, right? Like, oh, it'd be really cool to learn about this, or to also add this to my toolbox as a practitioner. But it wasn't ever calling me. It just was like, oh, that's a cool thing I want to learn. And then I would go and like, not resonating, not absorbing, not my tool. And it was so clear. And it took me a lot of years to finally recognize, like, if it ain't calling me, I'm not going, because it's futile. And it doesn't mean that we don't have discipline. It doesn't mean that we don't have drive or whatever else. But there's a difference between being disciplined and having drive towards those things that truly inspire us and gather our attention. And
it's putting your energy in the direction that it's meant to. Particularly because our prana and our energy is so important.
And it will guide us. It really will. If we listen, if we choose to turn this down and listen and feel and create, like you said, like we have to have intentional quiet space. We have to unplug occasionally. All of us. And we have to be able to hear in the space between. We have to be able to rest in the space between. We have to be able to be the seed under the earth in the darkness and the hole before it actually like breaks through and burgeons into this beautiful expression of whatever it will become. And if we can't figure that out, that's when we're just like walking around, just dead man walking, exhausted, depressed, overwhelmed, flooded, because we haven't learned to honor the system. We haven't learned to rest and move with life as it moves us.
The main message that I'm getting through all of this is just like that deep, deep trust. That deep trust in all of life. And like the amount of times that, just that things have brought me to my knees, and like those moments are just, truly that space of like, I trust in the unfoldment of everything. And so please guide me in the direction that I'm meant to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which is so much easier said than done, because it does require this deep surrender and shedding and releasing and all of this. But once we do actually just give ourselves over to that unlimited trust, there's so much that's actually there in that space, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's rich and
it's very
fertile, and
it's a little scary at first.
It is
when you haven't touched it,
accept it. Until you just
accepting,
come to familiarity with it,
with the unknown and all that lives in that space. And
absolutely,
there's it's indescribable to put words to what that experience is. But it's also, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Like it's a really beautiful space, and there's so much, like you said, guidance in there.
I think, kind of wrapping up for everyone with recognition, right? Where it's the year of the wood snake. Um, Snake is a big ally of mine. And you know what I love about it is like belly to the earth, like fluid, you know, they are just like so smooth and undulating, and there's not much rigidity. And yeah, they are constantly in connection with the mother. And then, yeah, when it's time and the skin that has supported them through that leg of their life is complete, it sheds so that they have the next skin to do the next leg of the journey, right? And it's just such a natural cyclical process. And I think this, you know, if we zoom out on what's happening right now and see that, you know, the Kali Yuga, the Vedic charts, the whatever, you know, I'm not a big astrological person, so I speak in very generalized understanding, but everything is pointing toward this being a period where there is going to be a massive shed, shift, and overhaul and the individual scale and the collective scale. And I think what kind of to just amplify what you were saying about being in that space of trust and not the mystery. What I really love about the mystery is it gives me so much room for imagination too. And if I can be in both the imagining and also the surrender and the trust that these seeds that have been planted all over the cosmos and on this earth, you know, will sprout forth when it's time, and things will come to bloom at just the right time and just the right order. If I can trust that while also letting myself be in a great expanse of imagination, that feels so abundant, right? That feels cosmological. That feels like I have access to everything and I don't need to know any of it in detail, but I can still keep moving with it, and I can keep building within this dark space, and I can keep creating, and I can keep musing with life itself, because I think it, you know, I think it really is choice, chance, and chaos. The 3 C's are a very real thing, and so yeah, learning to play and swim and be the surfer and sitting forward in ourselves and just being so gentle with ourselves and our fellow humans who, it's not easy humaning, and we were not trained very well, any of us. And so, yes, some people are doing this really clumsily. Some people are causing havoc. Some people are really inflicting pain.
But to trust that that is not the overall place that we're headed to. Like, that is not the overall vibration of like what is going to, like where we're going to be at. And like, it may seem a little overwhelming in that way right now, which is what I have, the types of conversations I have been having with my clients, and like, and it's okay. And coming back into that space of like, I trust that it's all going to work out for the greater good, that everything is going to be taken care of. And we do have to go through this chaos, right? Like, I don't know a bunch about how snakes do shed their skin, but I do know that there is kind of like a fight sometimes, a little bit, right? If there's like some
it's a writhing, and some pieces will like, stick. They have to,
but it's not gonna stick there forever. And that's the thing too, is it's like you can also like cling to these old ways, or you can just start to intentionally be like, oh, I'm feeling this call to release and let go, and so can I just lean into that, and can I trust instead of clinging? Because it's like you can try to, but you're gonna have to let go at some point, and it's either gonna be a fight to let it go, or you can just relax into it and let it unfold as it will, and be okay with whatever happens, and be okay being in the chaos, and be okay being in the calm and all of it, and just letting it all exist, all as one, and being that pillar within it by cultivating this space here for you in whatever way that looks.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my favorite mantras in my early rising shedding period of my life, like late 20s, and one that I still frequently offer up to my clients is I trust myself implicitly.
Yeah.
Take a breath, say that before you make a decision. If you're, in a place of flurry or, indecision or whatever else, I trust myself implicitly. And I think also being so gentle with ourselves, our fellow humans, the earth, the animals, like just being gentle in general. It doesn't mean we have poor boundaries. It doesn't mean we accept bad behavior, but just recognizing that the more we can unplug from the old systems, the old paradigms, the old cycles of behavior, we're not trying to fix anyone. We're just unplugging. Like I think our neutrality in that way, our unplugging from all the old, allows an organic shed to occur because it disrupts their pattern too. And if there's something that's no longer feeding that and wonks them, it's like, whoa, that person, that system, whatever it is, has to recalibrate too.
Perfect.
And so, I mean, it really is a service for us to pull our energy back to us and not feel responsible or like we need to come in over anyone.
I feel guilty about taking care of ourselves. That's like my core wound is guilt and the gene keys. So to like be okay with that.
And everyone's got such a different version to this. Some of us like structure, some of us like flow, some of us like art, some of us are more analytical. Like just remembering like there is so many different ways that we're all going to move through this, and that things are going to need to shift and unlock for us. And so just really, I've always loved the puzzle analogy, like if you are missing even one piece in that damn puzzle, you can't finish it.
Yeah.
And something created everything here. And if we are not accepting of the fact that there's all these puzzle pieces on the table that are somehow supposed to work together, and we may or may not see that in our lifetime.
But we are a part of
the building, and I want to say the mending, because I think that I think that there is a big rupture just in the collective psyche, and it's a lack of soul. Really, it's a lack of soul embodiment, because a soul embodied, I've never met a soul embodied who didn't want that for another and didn't bring all the qualities that we're inviting people to discover in themselves. And so, yeah, to be here and be part of that like spacious calling back of a soul's return and a connection to the earth and the all, I think is, at the end of the day, like the greatest thing that we can do. Live that invitation.
Such a gift.
Wow. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Conversation. I'm like, I could sit here all night.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. I'm
Before we
rabbit holes forever.
bring this fully to conclusion, I ask everyone this at the beginning of the podcast. I didn't ask you, what's something you're celebrating right now?
What's something I'm celebrating?
Yeah.
I love that question. I've been thinking about that question a lot. Not for me though, about asking.
Yeah.
Asking other people too. What am I celebrating? I am celebrating the freedom at which I experience myself. I am living the most fully expressed, loving, dharmic, aligned, gracious, generous, experience of being a human that I have since I've been on this planet. And it wasn't always that way. And most specifically in all of that is my voice. My voice used to be very meek and very, just hidden and tucked away. And it's not anymore. It says exactly what it needs, and it asks for help, and it admits defeat, and it is humble and kind and generous and real. And there's no bumbling anymore. And that's as new as even like a year or two ago. So I've just really been taking note of that, especially in this beautiful partnership I'm in. I've never experienced it that free in our partnership and reciprocal in that way, and ability to communicate. And I think that it is the greatest key that has unlocked all of me, as my voice. And of course, the inhabiting of the body, but the voice, like really being able to speak and express and ask and say sorry and do whatever needs to be done, just letting that continue to go. I feel like my life force in general is exponentially more just like consistent and solid, no matter what I'm facing, no matter what my external environment may be presenting. It's just like, it just keeps it flowing. So I'm celebrating my voice.
Hey, thank you for that. For sharing. Thanks for
Totally.
Appreciate you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad you're creating a space for people to explore themselves. And what are you celebrating?
It's a great question. I feel like so many things. I'm celebrating expansion. There's a lot of different expansion, whether it's like this podcast or moving, and just feeling that's just like general. There's just this energy in my life right now that's just, expanding out and coming into greater service and in alignment, and not playing small anymore, and just stepping fully into my power and not feeling guilty about it, and all these different things, and just letting that the expression my full expression gets to come through that expansion. So feels really
That's a good juicy place to be.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Love you.
Yeah, love you too, sister.